we had the state institution for the colored.
Oh man.
In Taft, Oklahoma, which is about 8 miles from my hometown, Muskogee, quote unquote hometown, and it was Governor Wagner who was firmly associated with the Ku Klux Klan, but he said, "Hey, we got so many crazy niggas in this state. We just can't have them wandering all over the place. So we're going to build an institution for the colored, for the crazy niggas around here. Because we got just so many of them. Because it was, insanity, as they call it today, was very prevalent. Under those conditions, you couldn't help but be insane. It was a common thing. So they built that, institution. Taft, institution for the insane, for the coloreds, right? And I guess it's still there. I don't know. Probably doesn't have that name anymore. But that's what it was for. Kind of way out in the middle of nowhere. They sent lots of black people to that institution at Taft. Because I guess he looked at it like a mercy thing, because with so many black people, sheriffs was killing them, and some crazy guy that's walking down the street, foaming at the mouth and talking to himself, and I guess they knew how wrong they were. To shoot somebody like that, this cold turkey. Of course, they would do it for a whole lot of them. But I guess it was just so much of it that they decided to build an institution for it and go ahead and pay the money. And it was Governor Wagner that did it, because I guess he more or less looked at it, well, hey, ain't no way in the world a nigga wouldn't be crazy. With what we put on them. So let's have a little place for them, that's those that go over the edge, who are no good at all. We can't get no work out of them or nothing. And just let them vegetate. But there's a lot of them that wasn't in the institution, maybe should have been. From time to time, I was one of them.
I'm in that club too.
Neely Fuller Jr. Context of white supremacy. The worthless Negro from Virginia, Gus T., in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the global system of white supremacy. We are doing our part on the global end so that people do not just think that this is, kind of a tiny problem every now and then in Mississippi or every now and then in South Africa where they don't have water. Global system. We're doing our part. We'll be here tomorrow, and in short order. You all know I am no fan of those early morning programs for people who've been listening, but time differences, if you're really dedicated to attempting to replace white supremacy with justice immediately, the big planet, different time zones as we have today. Tomorrow we will be here super early, 10, or do it correctly, we'll be here at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central, 10 a.m. Pacific. Ungodly early, but we will be chatting it up. Our guest joining us live from Spain. Cannot wait, and her research on racism in Venezuela. Cannot wait. Cannot wait. But that'll be tomorrow again. That's why I'll be excited, even though it'll be early. 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. White supremacy, racism in Venezuela. Looking forward. Today, that was Neely Fuller Jr. At the beginning, talking about, hey, the system of white supremacy is designed to drive black people, non-white people crazy. And hey, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she told us many, many times, non-white people, victims of racism, do not qualify for mental health. Gus T. included. Dr. Welsing said she included. Many times over the years, our program for today reminded me not only of Mr. Fuller and Dr. Welsing, Dr. Joy DeGrew Leary, she's been a repeat guest on the program. She wrote Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. Dr. Marva Robinson, who importantly, she is a mental health practitioner, but she is in the Missouri area. She was talking to black people after the shooting of Michael Brown Jr., talking about the importance of mental health. We were talking about tips and strategies to protect yourself if you're watching all of that on television way back 2014. But we've done a number of, that's just some, but we've done a number of programs talking about mental health and the different drapetomania, a number of different programs examining mental health within the confines system of white supremacy. This program continuing that legacy today. And Dr. Welsing, what else did she tell us all the time? She said, reading is more important than watching television. Gus T has said, hey, all of us non-white people, one thing that we should be doing, pick a non-fiction book just published the current calendar year. So that means 2026. All of us, we should pick one non-fiction book that we're going to read for the 2026 calendar year. I've said all the time, I don't think we grasp how many books are published about racism all over the world. I just don't think we grasp that, and white people are to blame for that too. But even now, it's just February 2026, and there are already brand new books that have been published about racism, a number of them. We will chat it up about one of them today. That text, Jim Crow in the Asylum, Psychiatry and Civil Rights in the American South. This text talk about black mental health and or the lack thereof. All about the different ways the system of white supremacy racism was maintained, refined, demanded in the field of mental health, looking at specifically in southern areas, although I'm sure much of this would probably be applicable regardless. But we're looking at specific so-called southern states today. The author, in addition to writing Jim Crow in the Asylum, which again published this year, she is a associate professor, tenured, and the Andrew W. Mellon Faculty Fellow for Nursing and the Humanities and Associate Faculty in the Department of History at Emory University down in Georgia. She teaches courses on the history of race in healthcare, critical theory, and nursing theory and philosophy. Excited, might even say appropriate for Black History Month to examine this sort of history. Even some of the exact things that you heard Mr. Fuller say. He said that they built this institution. They feel sorry because we shot up so many black people who might have been having a mental health problem, which still happens today. But he said, importantly, that W word, he said, we figure that we can't get no work out of them. Oh, my Lord. That is a whole chapter in the book. Are you crazy? You might be crazy, but I bet you're not crazy enough you can still get out there and pick some cotton. I bet you're crazy enough you can still get out there and do some work in the field. I bet we can teach you how to make a straitjacket. All kinds of work you can do, even if you are a crazy Negro. Major chunk of the research we will chat it up about today, as I said, I think very appropriate for Black History Month. Our guest joining us live from Australia, and we've been here so long, our 17 years, not even anything new. We've had a lot of guests on the program from Australia at this point, so yeah. Joining us from Australia to chat it up about our brand new book, Dr. Kylie Smith. Dr. Smith, are you with us?
I sure am.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And the time difference again, so gargantuan. It is for us Sunday, for me specifically, it is Sunday afternoon still, sun still up. For Dr. Smith, it is Monday morning. Wacky big world. But thank you so much for carving out a bit of your Monday morning to chat with us, Dr. Smith.
Thank you.
For sure. For listeners, since your book is brand new and all, anything that you would like to tell us about the work that you do, kind of briefly before we hop into Jim Crow in the Asylum?
You know, it was just interesting when I first jumped on the line and I could hear that excerpt that you were playing, and I was sitting here kind of nodding my head. But I do think it's important that people know that I am, you know, a white woman not from America, and that I wrote the book while I was, you know, spending 10 years of my life at Emory. And I struggled a lot with that idea of positionality, like who am I to write this kind of history? You know, it's very much a Black history, but actually what I figured out was actually it's a problem of whiteness, and it's a history of white supremacy. And so I do think that that is our story as white people that we need to write and be accountable for.
Wow. That was one, all I had to do was listen quietly for a little while. Like, one, she already knocked out one of my questions saying that she is a white woman, so that's great. Love it. Poop, scratch that one out. And then I was going to say, wow, I wonder if she was born in Australia. It's like, ooh, mate, yeah. She was born in Australia. Got it. Okay. What that is, wow, that brings even more questions. So you came all the way to the other side of the world to study racism in asylums in the U.S. Like, what?
Yeah, I mean, I initially came because I was thinking about nurses and writing about mental health nurses, and that led me to think about the impact of segregation on the hospitals that those nurses were working in. And when I was in Atlanta, I remember people saying to me, oh, Atlanta's not segregated. And I arrived there and I'm like, yes, it is. And so it was really obvious to me that there are people with really serious mental health needs, and those needs are not being met. And so that kind of led me to think about what impact has the history of segregation had on current mental health service provision in the South. I mean, it's right there in your face.
That is amazing. Wow. I can only say, I don't know who told you that about Atlanta, and we don't have no segregation in Atlanta. I mean, at any time period, they could have said that 1965, 2020, 1980, 2001, at any time, that would be out of this world. Yeah. Laughable and or dangerously deceptive. Like, wow, yeah. What a lie. They still have parts of Atlanta that are trying to secede, like, yeah. Right now. Come on, that's groovy. Anyway, that made me lose my train of thought. That was so goofy. All right, so she came here. Nope, nothing wrong. So she came to. It sounds like you did not have that as an initial focus to come here to talk or study, investigate racism in the asylums. That kind of shifted after you got here. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was always conscious of it. I mean, you don't grow up white in Australia and not be conscious of racism here too. You know, we have a huge problem and a massive gap in health outcomes between black and white Australians. So, I was always interested in that. But yeah, when I got there and it was so in my face, and to have people wanting to be silent about it and write about the history of psychiatry as if it wasn't a racial problem, there was no way I was going to pretend otherwise.
Fascinating. Okay. We'll see if we can cover as much material as we can. Our program, we always start off with definition. I use the term racism and the term white supremacy as synonyms. Same definition for both terms. The definition I use: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists? Do you think that definition is accurate?
Oh, it absolutely exists. Absolutely. And I think it's kind of painfully accurate, actually. I think that people think, oh, it just exists and I don't have anything to do with that. But actually, we all do, and we all benefit from it every day. And the global system is entirely about the active subjugation of people.
Wow. I guess for my clarification, when we say we all benefit, do you mean everybody in the world? I'm sorry?
White people.
White people.
White people.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Let's see. Well, one more. This will be interesting. I'm not sure. I've been asking this question for some time. I haven't had as many opportunities to ask white people who were not born in the U.S., but there's a non-white author. He wrote a report directly talking about racism, and he wrote, white people are often sincerely and greatly pained by racism, but rarely are they pained enough. And I've been asking about the first portion of that sentence, and especially in the context of Jim Crow and the Asylum. You as a white person and your research, putting this book together, your studies, and you being on multiple continents and studying, examining, thinking about what it means to be white, do you think that a significant number of people classified as white are often sincerely and greatly pained by racism?
Not enough, I don't think. Again, I think there's this tendency to think that it's something out there, and that I'm not guilty of it as a white person. It's just the system. But it's been really interesting actually returning to Australia and seeing this kind of casual, everyday racism, the way that people just make assumptions based on what someone else looks like, and it's this kind of like, oh, I don't mean any harm by it. But yeah, I don't think that we're pained enough. No.
Fascinating. We'll get to address this again tomorrow from the Venezuelan perspective with the jokes. I guess this does give a quick, fascinating opportunity, kind of a different comparison between the hemispheres. What are some of the differences that you've seen in how white people practice racism in the States versus your native Australia?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's much in some ways in America it's more in your face, right? It's so obvious, and maybe it was more obvious to me coming from somewhere where it is more subtle. And so when I came to the US, I was like, oh my God, like that thing about segregation. It was utterly laughable to me that someone would say to me that Atlanta wasn't segregated. It was like the first thing I noticed. And then, of course, over the course of 10 years watching the political environment, I, arrived during Obama, and then the next thing I know, Trump is president. And out come all of these, it's like the lid was lifted off all these things that people had been pretending that they weren't thinking or feeling. And now I think it's much more overt in the US than it is in Australia. and much more, I would say it's much more structurally overt, and you can't think about ICE and not see that as, a very active form of racism. Well, how it's different in Australia is that it's absolutely embedded. White Australians can be incredibly racist, especially if they are more recent immigrants and they may have been flying from migrational effects in, say, Europe, like the UK or something like that, and they think they can come here and escape that, and they think they're coming to a nice little white colony. But Australia is incredibly multicultural, like just real, like we're part of Southeast Asia, so that's kind of really obvious here. And so the racism takes a slightly different form, and it's very much linked to indigeneity as opposed to color of your skin. So the structural issues here are incredibly deep for Indigenous Australians, who are, the world's oldest living culture, and yet they're just so disrespected here, in a country that has been completely overtaken by, British ideas of what is normal, what is healthy, what you can do with the land, and the amount of trauma that has been caused by that, I think, is actually really where we're at in Australia, is this kind of generational trauma that is almost impossible to break because of the long-term effects of white supremacy and colonialism here.
Fascinating. More direct here. Were you in the U.S. During the 2021 insurrection, January 6th?
Oh, yes, I was. How those people did not end up in jail, well, anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole. But yes, I was.
What does it mean to be white? Hey, that's how you pardons for all. Except my brother James Cole, who did not get a pardon. Black male, they accused him of planting pipe bombs. Where's the pardon, man? We've been saying that for weeks now. Where's the pardon for Mr. Cole? If you're going to pardon everybody, pardon everybody. No jail time for anyone. Anywho's, the 2026 publication, Jim Crow in the Asylum, Psychiatry and Civil Rights in the American South. What was were you trying to solve a problem with this book?
Yes, I was actually. I came at it because I was a historian working in a school of nursing, and a lot of my students at Emory were pre-med or pre-health or pre-nursing. I was very aware of the racist content that they were learning in their classroom that they would then go on to perpetuate as future healthcare providers. And that racist attitude is this idea that ideas about biological difference. They're actively being taught misinformation about black bodies, about black minds, that there is a biological difference between black and white folks. And they're being taught that with no context. If there are differences in current health outcomes, then to me, it is so obvious that those are an effect of history. But none of those people who are learning to be doctors and nurses learn that history. And so that was my immediate problem. I was really determined to teach my nursing and pre-med students that they were walking into a system that was not broken, actually. It was working exactly as it was designed. The American healthcare system works to protect white men's health mostly, and that's how it was built. And to say it's broken is to misunderstand it entirely. And then they're carrying attitudes about racial difference that are not even scientifically valid. So that was a real problem for me. And so people would say to me, oh, but, we don't do racism anymore. And, I'm a nurse and I treat everyone the same. I'm like, no, you don't. You literally don't, because you're making assumptions about someone's health based on the color of their skin. You're saying, oh, they're going to be more at risk of this or more at risk of that because of the color of their skin. And you don't even know that person before you're making that assumption. So I was really concerned about that. And in relation to mental health, I was really concerned about the amount of people I saw on the street in Atlanta mostly black folks, mostly with untreated mental health symptoms. And I was very good friends with a psychiatrist at Grady Hospital. Shout out to Dr. Grant, who's doing amazing things there trying to break down that kind of internal racism. When she would tell me about getting students or even her fellow practitioners who would say, oh, well, this person is black, therefore they're more likely to have schizophrenia. And I would like lose my mind, and I would be like, well, that's a historical problem. Like, you need to understand that this misdiagnosis is historically entrenched, and there's no biological reason why that should be the case. So those were the two kind of immediate problems I was really intent on solving.
Wow, that is fascinating. Even one, it's fascinating. Many people that write books about racism confess that they wrote the book, they were not trying to solve a problem. So that in of itself is, wow, okay. And then, and even for me, I lived in Atlanta, so hearing all of this is especially, I had the same observations and because they have such a high population of homeless black people, that
Right.
alone is a mental health crisis. So, no progress at all.
No, none at all.
And importantly, Dr. Smith, she said, and I've echoed this sentiment previously, she said, it is fundamental to grasp the system is not broken. This is how it was designed to function. Whose lives are valuable? White people's, not black people's at all. So all of these whoopses and error. I think even Atlanta, that's where they had the young lady who was, she had some sort of brain difficulty, and she didn't have signs of vitality in life, but she was pregnant, and they kept her alive against her family's wishes just for the pregnancy type of thing. I think that happened in Atlanta. They have all kinds of savage.
Did.
Oh, okay. Thank God. I haven't lived there in a while. I'm just going off memory, but yeah, that's ATL. No progress at all, and that's healthcare type things in Atlanta, where they have the Centers for Disease Control is right there. That's healthcare for black people in the capital city of Georgia. Anywho, who importantly for all of this information, and particularly saying that you're trying to address a current right now problem, who was your intended audience for this book?
I do hope that healthcare, future and present healthcare providers read it, and I do know that they are reading it, which is great. Again, my friend Dr. Grant, she has her interns and residents read it, and I give them a guest lecture when I can. So that is really great. I would really like healthcare policymakers to read it. Because I think that they're making policy decisions about mental health funding in a vacuum in terms of their own. Again, they think that they're making decisions that are based on cost-benefit analysis alone, and they're either ignorant about or don't care about how that, of course, then replicates racist and racial, biases. But also I think there's an audience there, and I tried to write the book a little bit differently. There's an audience there for people who have been in or have had family in these institutions. And I am talking about black folks, and I am concerned that they don't get their stories told. And so I wrote the book a little bit differently to how I might otherwise. And I tried really hard to spend time in the archives looking for stories from and about black patients and their families. You can imagine what those archives were like, but there were stories there. And so I left a lot else that I could have said on the table to make room and to really try and center the stories of black families and communities and patients, because their stories just haven't been told. And I wanted them to be able to see themselves.
I'll share one because you actually start the book with one of those letters, the prologue, Mrs. Hurston's letter. In January 1965, Mrs. Claudette Hurston of Vicksburg, Mississippi, wrote the following letter to the Secretary of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare in Washington, D.C. Dear Sir, I have written the President also. I have a desperate problem. I don't have any alternative. I have a violent, mentally ill, 11 years old son. For 5 years, I have gone through every step in the state to get help. They haven't given me anything but the runaround. I am afraid. I can't handle my son, Thomas, anymore. He's a danger to himself, my smaller children, and everyone else around as well. He disturbs the whole neighborhood. 5 years I have been begging and going through everything to get help from this state. 5 months ago, I found out the hospital I had applied to, Ellisville State Hospital, has taken out all the Negro children, and it's not any place here for Negro children. A judge here made out a court order for him to go to Whitfield State Hospital for adults. Oof. It's been 5 months since he was in jail, and he can't take care of himself, and I had to go get him. He fell on the heater and burnt his arm terribly during a nervous fit. He throws anything he gets his hands on at the other children and myself. Sir, I can't keep him here anymore. And he can't stay in jail. I had to let him go back because he will die from lack of attention. Please, help if you can, sir. It's a matter of life and death now. I waited until he got too large and sick, thinking the state would help me. Please let me hear from you right away. Thank you so much, Mrs. Claudette Hurston. I thought, wow, just one, that is a different way of starting a book that's going to be out about the history of racism in mental health facilities. And then you go on to talk about tracking down some of the relatives of Mrs. Claudette Hurston to give even more background information. Like, I thought that is also a very peculiar way to begin a history book. Like, can you give some of the detail about that thought process and why you wanted to begin the book that way?
Yeah, yeah. It was really important for me to, again, I was doing two things at once. There's a kind of a method, or like an acceptable way to write a history book, right? And you read it and it's meant to be really objective, and it's meant to be this happened and then that happened. And firstly, that can be kind of boring to read that kind of history, and I'm not really into writing that kind of history. And it was also really important that the first voice that people heard was not mine. You know, I really wanted as much as possible for people to just feel that letter, to see that letter, to read it, and to feel something of what Mrs. Hurston felt. So it was really about decentering both white methods of writing history and also decentering white voices in that history, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you write about how it would have been easier if you were writing a book about the experiences of white patients, because the volume, the record is so much more voluminous, and you would have had so much more material to pick from, and it was a lot slimmer trying to go through and pick voices like Miss Hurston out so you could hear what black people have to say about all of this. I also thought this was really kind of refreshing and important as well. This is just all in the prologue, a little bit further down. You write, I am overt about that process and about my role in interpreting these sources. This approach raised several ethical questions about my own positionality. I am a white person, not American, writing about what was done to black people by white people in the American South. I am writing about the way white supremacy worked in psychiatry in an attempt to expose the harms of that racism, which live with us still. And if I wanted to just write the history of the policies, then I probably would not think about ethical questions at all. But I am not that kind of historian, and this is not that kind of book. My desire to try to say something about why this history matters to the people who lived through it means that I must pay attention to the harms I may cause by not considering my positionality. Also kind of I won't say refreshing, but peculiar. That's what I'll say. That is very uncommon to encounter that at the beginning of a book, and especially even a white person saying that I must pay attention to the harms I may cause by not considering, hey, I am a white person doing this work. Did you,
Right.
I don't know, did you at any point in reflecting or having people edit the book, did anyone raise a flag and say, hey, you are a white person, and the way that you structured this, the way that you wrote this, I think there's a problem here?
No, no. And I have a lot of really wonderful history of medicine colleagues who are African American scholars, and I would just check in with them regularly about, should I be doing this? And there were times when I said maybe I shouldn't be doing this, and they all reassured me that I should, and that someone had to do it, and it needed to be done, and that good history is good history. So I kind of proceeded. I met a wonderful person over in Tuskegee, and I expressed my concern to her, and she just sat me down and she said, I hope you don't think that you being white means that you can't write this book. And so I just kind of checked in with people all the time. And a lot of historians don't do that. They don't do that. And we assume also as historians that it's our right to go to archives and pull out pieces of paper and write someone's story. And as a historian of psychiatry, I was doubly conscious of the way I told those stories. And I think because it's a history of mental health and that I'm a professor at a very prestigious university that itself has caused a lot of harm in the South, whether they want to admit it or not. And so there is a responsibility there for me to be very careful about the stories that I told and the way that I told them, and for people to know that I was not pretending to be a part of that community at any point. And so therefore, my interpretation is always kind of limited by that I'm an outsider. But also I think sometimes being an outsider means that you can have a pretty clear vision.
Fascinating. Context of white supremacy. Our guest, Dr. Kylie Smith, joining us live from Australia. I will say that, and much obliged for all of the detail in your response there, Dr. Smith, that I was a bit disappointed when I heard I assume it was a non-white person who told you said, sat you down, Tuskegee, who sat you down and said, hey, just because you're white doesn't mean that you can't write this, and all the rest of it to kind of give you a pep talk. I was a little disappointed there. I do not think any white historian, especially a white person with a doctorate, they do not need a pep talk from a black person about writing a book, any book about anything. White people have written so many books on racism, like, woo, it is overflowing. Like, you could not read them all if you had 3, 4, 5 lifetimes. And some of them are constructive, some of them are not. If you want somebody to check out your manuscript and call you and say, hey, Dr. Smith, I think you might be practicing racism here and you need to look at this is wrong, sign me up. But I mean, woo, that almost feels kind of plantational to me. Like, man, we do not need to give white, especially about writing a book. They have done that like forever. In fact, it reminded me, Medical Apartheid, one of the greatest books I've ever read. Harriet A. Washington, black female. She said she was pressured not to write that book, had difficulty where white people were upset with her about trying to publish such information about the long history of medical racism. Did you, as a white, but you're not even born here, you as a non-native white woman in these parts, did you get resistance to publishing this type of book?
I did not have any resistance from the actual publisher. The University of North Carolina Press have been wonderful from the get-go. And they were also very supportive of the book being published open access, so you can read a version of it online for free.
Wow.
So it's totally open and freely available, and that free version has some extra material on it, some digital kind of resources. And so big shout out to UNC Press. They were never hesitant about it. In fact, they were incredibly like, yes, hurry up, finish writing it. But I did get, again, not surprising, pushback from white women, often, who were nurses. And I think that this is kind of, and I say this because I think it's really important that people think that nurses are angels and that they can do no harm, but it's absolutely not the case. And some white women in nursing are very problematic, and a lot of people, I was writing that book in Atlanta, right? And, there's a certain generation of older white women who would say to me, in that wonderful Southern accent, like, bless your heart, like, you're not from here, you don't understand the context, or that's just the way it was back then, or we don't do that anymore. And I would be like, bless your heart back, like, of course you do, like. So yeah, I got pushback from like that, and I got, I would say I got a fairly, I got a lot of pushback from, from some colleagues about, how dare you write that sort of history. Yeah, it was interesting.
How dare you write that sort? It's amazing. Were these white women, white men, both?
Yeah, white women, all white women.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
What did
yeah.
they get specific, or was it just general disgust?
Yeah, and just like they would get, like I got ostracized by a bunch of people because they thought that as a historian in a school of nursing, I should only be writing stories that talked about how great nurses are and not how problematic the healthcare system itself is. So and a lot of them are not seeing that connection between the history and the present. They're like that. I would say the biggest comment I got was that's just the way it was back then, as if that's not how it is right now, which it is. Interesting.
My only bit of would be just picking out words are very important. She said that a lot of people think of nurses as angels. Whew. The religion of white supremacy, even that lexicon is connected to the history of excluding everyone but white women from that profession. So yes, think of nurses as angels and Jesus as a white man and religion of white supremacy. But she said that a lot of these Southern Georgia white women specifically were talking about that they said, oh man, that's just the way it was back then. We had all these burly niggers and, black people, you got to be careful, that they said that they didn't know. That would be my only bit of pushback. I think white people are you cannot be a white person and be ignorant about racism. You will get, and I think this is true in Australia, the U.S., Venezuela, Spain, Germany, Netherlands. You cannot be a white person and be ignorant about racism. You will get in trouble with other white people. They will, as she said, they will let you know immediately. Hey, doctor, what are you doing, Dr. Smith? You're a white woman. You haven't been taught better. And it would have been the same thing if she'd stayed in Australia and you're not doing the correct thing. You act like you don't like our jokes about the indigenous population or whatever else it happens to be. And hey, you get it. So I don't think they're ignorant. I don't think it's they don't see it. They're not blind. It's the same dedication that you write about in Jim Crow in the Asylum. This is what we want. This is the way it's supposed to be, like forever. And I guess I would go back real quick, even that passage in the prologue where you're talking about your own classification as a white woman writing this material about the history of white supremacy and the mistreatment of black people in the States. It almost makes it sound like just that classification, you being classified as white, it makes it sound like all white people are racist. You did already say that all white people benefit from it, but it makes it sound like all white people are racist. Is that true?
Oh, it's so hard to not be. You know what I'm like? White people are lazy, and so it's really easy to fall into what everyone else is doing. Like you said, I grew up, in a predominantly white neighborhood, and there's a lot of kind of, jokes again, like around ethnicity, around migration from Southern Europe or Southeast Asia, right? And it was kind of un-Australian of you not to make fun of, Con the Greek running the fish and chip shop around the corner, right? Like that kind of stuff. It's just this casual racism that's so inherent to Australian culture that I think it's so hard to check it in yourself. But I was very fortunate, I guess. I was married to an Australian Indigenous man, and I think that opened my eyes in many ways. My mother was very casually racist, which is kind of interesting. And so I just kind of, I don't know. I mean, yes, it's there and you feel it in yourself. And I think that anyone's lying if they say they're not, like we are just bred that way. And so it's a constant effort and a commitment to not be racist.
Wow, Dr. Smith, you have the magnitude of your responses sometimes is so much. Gee whiz. Oh, I don't even know where to begin. I can't miss that. She did say, I guess it wouldn't be right of me. The correct counter-racist method. I don't think you answered our question, Dr. Smith. That passage makes it sound like, and even your response just now makes it sound like everybody classified as white is racist. Is that true?
Oh, yes. Yes, whether they want to admit it or not. And I think that the people who are not are the ones who are conscious of the extent to which they are. And they're working to overcome it. I did one of those Harvard tests. I don't know if you've ever seen them. And they're meant to be like spontaneous response, and they flash a picture up on the screen, and you're meant to say whether that person is a criminal or not. And of course, it's about blackness, right? And so, and I scored like negative on the racism scale, but that doesn't mean I'm not racist. You know what I mean? Like, there are still parts of my brain that fall back into how I was taught when I was, a kid in a predominantly white neighborhood. Like you just have to be aware of that in yourself and work to not let it continue.
Wow. Thank you for answering my question. Appreciate the honesty. I said you gave so much just in that initial response. I was even going to mess up the order now that I had a moment to look at it correctly. The correct order of priorities. She said her mom was racist. What did your mom do to practice racism? She said casually. What did she, and it sounds like in a racially restricted region where you all didn't even have a lot of non-white people to complain about, what was your mom doing to practice racism?
Yeah, so we grew up in the suburbs of Sydney, which is, historically pretty, it's actually historically called Gadigal country, so it belongs to a particularly large group of Indigenous people, and we were never taught that at school. I grew up in the 70s, and we were never taught anything about Indigenous culture. We were only ever taught about, the great British explorers and all of that kind of colonial crap. And then I remember going into the city with my mom one day when I was pretty young, and we went to Chinatown. Sydney has a great Chinatown, and she said, all the signs are in Chinese. And I looked at her and I said, well, yeah, we're in Chinatown. And she said, well, I can't read them. And I said, they're not written for you. So just that kind of like, that's what I mean, this kind of casualness. Like she would not have called herself racist because of her own family heritage, where there is possibly some Indigenous heritage in her family, and my other grandparents are Polish, right? So there's this like, oh, we can't be racist. But yeah, you can. If you think that the signs in Chinatown have to be in English, I hate to tell you, but you're racist.
Fascinating. Woo! I'm sure there's some other illustrations, but Jim Crow in the, wow, fascinating. Global system of white supremacy. There is nowheres to run. Jim Crow she said it's un-Australian of you if you don't participate in the racist jokes. Are you serious? What? Come on.
Yeah.
Lost my train of thought again. Okay, we got it back. Nurses are angels. It's so much. It's so much to
Yeah.
process. So this is on page 27, kind of moving through Jim Crow, which I would say folks should check it out, especially if you have connections to any of these states. I guess you can tell us Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. Why did you pick those three southern states specifically to focus on?
Yeah, good question. I chose Georgia because I was in Georgia and I
Mm.
really wanted to understand why mental health services in Atlanta and in Georgia were in such a mess. And so that was like number one. And then I thought, well, a comparison would be really interesting with Alabama because it's right next door. And I also knew that there had been some mental health court cases in Alabama. And so I was really interested in thinking about this connection with civil rights history, right? What is this intersection between mental health history and civil rights history? And then Mississippi, because everyone always says that Mississippi is, Alabama's grateful for Mississippi because things are always worse there. But it turns out that they were not necessarily. So those were three states that I could compare, that I could get to, I could access records from, and that I thought I could make a meaningful comparison. And also because they are repeatedly the three states ranked lowest on current mental health outcomes.
Wow. Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah,
Jeez. Okay. Now, for having lived in Atlanta, I can see why.
yeah.
Woof. That is, I'm going to have to think about that one. Jeez. Thank you for that, Dr. Smith. I'll read a chunk. This is in chapter, I thought it was chapter 1, chapter 2. I got ahead of myself. Enabling segregation. And I think that's such a critical theme that runs throughout the duration of the text, that
Yeah.
these mental health facilities, they were about reaffirming, solidifying the system of white supremacy. Like, this is not no progressive and, oh, we've got sympathy for you because you got some, like, not at all. This is making sure the system of white supremacy is being represented, maintained, and refined in all three states' mental health facilities in different ways. Looks a little different, but same end result. White power, the Negro. Oh man, you're a black person in a mental health facility in the 20th century. Any of these states? Oh my goodness. She
Mm-hmm.
writes specifically. This is page 42 in chapter 2. The existence of segregation in psychiatric institutions is not in itself surprising, as historian Wendy Gonover and others have demonstrated. Segregation was utterly foundational to the wave of psychiatric hospital building that occurred from the mid 19th century, and those who did not abide by it, like John M. Galt in Virginia, found themselves quickly ostracized by their professional associations linked to the emerging psychiatric profession. Just pausing there, that would be another one. You cannot be white and be ignorant about racism. Mr. Galt, I don't want to go along with the really
Mm-hmm.
consequences. Seen that
Yeah.
consistently. You can't be a white person and be dumb. I didn't know. What do you mean? We get not even possible. Continuing. The often cited heroine of the psychiatric history, Dorothea Dix, showed no concern or interest in the welfare of the few black patients she may have seen, and their interests were never part of her appeals to the state governments for psychiatric reform. The same is true of the father of the modern psychiatric hospital, Thomas Kirkbride. In the context of psychiatry, this needs to be understood not so much as benign oversight, but the active repudiation of the idea of black psychology itself, the belief that there was no illness to be cured because black patients were not capable of complex emotional or affective lives, and if they were institutionalized, it was because their behavior was seen as a threat to white society in some way. In this sense, for psychiatry, the black patient was never fully human, and this belief laid the foundation for not just institutional segregation, but the way the black person would be treated as a patient. I thought that is, I reminded myself, like, oh yeah, this is hopping ahead to chapter 2, but woo, that is really key for kind of thinking about all of this, that the entire framework and foundation of psychiatry is Negroes, almost as you say, kind of black equals mental illness and crazy anyway. So
Yep.
since you're not a human, we don't, I mean, psychiatry, this is more kind of just warehousing you and getting you back to the plantation type of a thing, unless I misread.
No, you did not misread. That's exactly what they were doing.
Wow. I feel like this is so plain spoken here. Like I
Thank you.
read a lot of books on racism, and they frequently, it will not be that specific, that being for black people, being institutionalized is more about, is this Negro a threat to white people in some way?
Yeah.
Then, well, I mean, that is really explicit language. Like, did you want to make sure that this is one, I'm not going to pussyfoot around about this one or try and, dodge? Let's be as explicit as
Yeah.
possible about what's happening here.
Yeah, I think I was really, um, riled up during 2020 and 2021 watching medical associations say, oops, sorry, we were racist once. And they really had no idea what they meant by that. And so I was really irritated when the American Psychiatric Association put out an apology, and it was pretty lame. It was like, we're sorry that for whatever part we had in racism. And what I was trying to get at there is that actually psychiatry created and reinforced racism, right? And so if we can't get to that piece of it, then we just keep repeating the same issue, and we keep looking for a solution, which is maybe individual anti-bias training or equity kind of outcomes or affirmative action, but you're not dealing with the ideology itself. And you mentioned that in your kind of intro about drapetomania, right? That's what I'm really trying to get people to think about, is that we need to go back to the plantation to think about these ideas. And if psychiatrists at the time, at the foundation of this discipline called psychiatry, believed that the black patient was either A, already crazy, that they were just, the entire culture was pathological, or B, freedom would make them crazy, right? So this debate about black craziness was totally related to emancipation. So again, there's this kind of political ideology, and you see that come up again during the civil rights battles, right? This kind of medical justification for segregation. Either, black culture is entirely pathological, or, black people aren't fit for civilization. So it was really important to me that I was just really straight about what I saw repeating, that those tropes are repeating, and that they are embedded in the so-called science of psychiatry itself.
Pseudoscience. Some might even say eugenics, phrenology,
Yeah.
long history.
Yeah.
You come back to this, or this, it's recurring, this idea of crazy black people basically means you are a threat to, and even all the way back to the plantation, crazy means you're trying to escape. Crazy means you're trying to do something against racism. Crazy might even mean that you are not sufficiently willing to bow and be humble in the presence of white people. Like, that might even be enough that, hey, Leroy, we lock you up for who knows how long. You write, and even control. I thought this was so important when you detail the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama and black people working to have some autonomy and really to combat these notions of racism. Dr. Prince Pantanelia Barker, my apologies for the pronunciation, but black people, black psychiatrists working to try to have some humanity for patients and do the correct thing and practicing mental health for black people who they knew were suffering because of racism. And the opposition from white state officials in Alabama is, we can maybe have facilities for black people. White people have to be in charge. You can have some black folks there. We can maybe even put some money in. White people have to be in charge. You write succinctly, this is the bottom, going backwards, chapter 1. White support for the facility at Tuskegee was initially based on concerns for the white community, which is super important too, who argued the Negro insane are a danger, and they are much more liable to be a danger to white than to Negro, direct quote. But that support was also premised on the demand for managerial control of the institution, out of an insistence that any white person who worked there could not be under the supervision of a black manager. That's why so many times this book, the racism is so flagrant that, I mean, just under, and you even point out that some of the time these black doctors, they had better training than some of these white people. That doesn't matter. System of white supremacy. Just, can you talk about that tussle for control that was happening at Tuskegee?
Yeah. I mean, that's a long history there with the Tuskegee Veterans Association and that hospital at Tuskegee that had in the 1920s, and there, was a kind of a backlash against it being built there, and people were concerned also, within the National Medical Association about why would you put, a black-only hospital in this, the cesspit of Alabama racism. But I think the issue therefore about what is the point of a psychiatric hospital is really important. And so for white people, it was really about locking up people that you're scared of. And I think that that's really important because fear still plays such a big part in our approach to the mentally ill, right? We just are so intolerant of having someone walking down the street who's maybe, has a tick or is speaking to someone that you can't see. Like, what we think that they should automatically be locked up. But it's really much worse, of course, when you're a person of color, because your option then becomes, well, I'm going to have to call the police, right? So there's that kind of fear. But I was really struck, and I really wanted to make that point about the management of those hospitals, because it is really important in terms of what we see today in terms of professional standing, and how there's so much work being done about racial concordance between providers and patient population, and it's well understood that people have better health outcomes if they can see a practitioner from their own race or culture, especially obviously for black folks. So, and I really did want to make that point again, and that's why that chapter is the first chapter, exactly as you just said, that those doctors at Tuskegee, those psychiatrists, they were the best trained doctors in the entire South. You couldn't do psychiatry as a degree in Alabama until 1956. Those physicians at the Tuskegee VA were trained all around the world, France, Edinburgh, Boston, and then the only place they could get a job where they could make a meaningful contribution to their community back in the South was the VA. And so they're kind of forming this wonderful little network of practitioners who are trying to intervene in the community. And I wanted to center their story as well, and to remind people that there were black folks in the South who were trying to do something about mental health, and they knew that the system was a problem, and that there was just so much white supremacy in the government that wouldn't even let them take charge of their own kind of healthcare because of this, fear of, well, I can't have a black doctor tell a white nurse what to do. And that became an issue later for, horrible things like the Sovereignty Commission and the Ku Klux Klan. Like, that was part of their kind of issue with psych hospitals, where they thought that a black person might be in charge of a white worker.
Wow. Wow. That is, I have the Sovereignty Commission on my list of study. I did not, wow, that is, Again, now, if you have that long list of gripes, you also are not ignorant about racism, and it's so
Exactly.
specific. Like we can't be working for even well-trained niggers. We don't do that either. Um,
No.
I think it's so important to grasp this, and the miscegenation comes up so frequently all
Yeah.
over the world. In fact, we were just talking about Australia. I just mentioned we were talking about World War II, and I
Mm,
said there's a brand new book that came out about lost Tuskegee Airmen in World War
mm,
II. And I said that we had a black, that's why I said it's no big deal us having a guest on from Australia. Been there, done that many times over.
yeah.
We had a white filmmaker on. She did the documentary film Black Soldier Blues, and it talks
Yeah.
about black U.S. soldiers during World War II. They went to Australia specifically, and the first part of it is because global system, white people in Australia, maybe, I don't know, your grandparents, I don't know, your mom's side of the family, dads, who knows, but white people in Australia said, oh, no, no, no. You don't send no niggers over here. We have a white only policy. And so they had a long tussle over that. This is in the middle of World War II, as she said, there in the South Pacific. So Japan is right there. And we,
Yeah.
you don't send no. And so they compromise. And so the black people can come, but they can't get off the boat. And they can't have guns. And so some of the soldiers, they talk about being in the jungle, and they can hear Japanese soldiers mocking them. And they don't have guns. I think they had sticks or mops or something that you cannot shoot. Anyway,
Mm,
they get later in the film, and they do eventually let some of the black dude soldiers off of the boat, and oh man, they go and do a little too much touching with white Australian women, and oh man, they call these legal court hangings. I say they are lynching because it's the same product, but whatever. Our filmmaker, white Australian filmmaker, she read some of the letters that these black soldiers wrote home to their black family members the night before they were going to be lynched for hanging out with these white Australian women and being accused of rape. Like, man,
mm,
amazing stuff. Black Soldier Blues, amazing documentary. You can watch it online. But it reminded me of that reading this. This is bottom of page 25, going to the top of 24, promoting mental health at the Tuskegee Institute. You write, the wide net that Partlow and others like him sought to cast was based on a very broad definition of deficiency, which reflected the nature of psychiatry in the early 20th century. Even though most physicians and psychiatrists differentiated, sometimes crudely in this period, between mental illness and mental deficiency, attitudes towards treatment and care of both were underpinned by eugenic thinking to the extent that they were perceived as inheritable disorders through either genetics or family patterns of behavior which led to unethical and involuntary forced sterilizations. These attitudes were compounded in places where mental illness and mental deficiency were treated in the same space, which was usually the case in the South because of the reliance on single large institutions. For the black patient, this was particularly problematic because of the existing tendency to conflate blackness with intellectual and emotional inferiority and therefore disability. This made it particularly easy for white supremacists to make a case for eugenics when blackness and madness were posed as a threat to white society. If social segregation and black codes worked to control the threat of miscegenation in everyday life, then the network of confinement created by institutions like prisons and psychiatric hospitals were designed to take care of everyone else. That
mm,
also is pretty like straightforward, no pussyfooting. That is
mm,
almost kind of chilling because that makes it sound like we already know, like, this is not therapeutic. Therapy is
mm,
for humans. Humans are chimps. So, but
yeah.
that makes it sound like this is just a part of social control to make sure that we got our niggers where they're supposed to be. You don't looking at no white women. You're not asking for
Mm,
no jobs. this is just about domination. Like, that is, wow. Like, I just hadn't thought about asylums in that manner before, but I mean, that makes it very plain.
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on there, and I don't mean to ever say that people were committed who were not suffering in some way. Like there's plenty of evidence that there were mentally ill Black people committed to these institutions, and sometimes they are aware of that fact that they have an illness, that they should be there to be treated, and that they expect to go home. And that is very true. And Mrs. Hurston's letter is really interesting because she's actually asking for access to that system, right? A lot of people would say, oh, Black folks didn't put their crazy in an asylum, and that is also partially true. But at times, people did need help, and they expected help, and they wanted to be treated like a patient, right? But it is also the case that there's plenty of evidence that people were committed to psych hospitals who maybe just had some sort of intellectual disability, and now would not be institutionalized in any way. And that's borne out in some of the statistics. Like in Mississippi, the biggest number of diagnosis is a category called mental deficiency for Black folks. And there, I could go on for hours about the diagnostic process, and, I don't want to bore you, but there is plenty of evidence that people who were just, maybe a little different, maybe had issues with family, were ended up, and in Mississippi in particular, you could be committed by a police officer. There was no need for like a legal process. Like a lawyer told me that in Mississippi, all you needed was a highway patrolman could pick up someone who was just walking, just wandering, and have two doctors sign the back of a speeding ticket, and that person could be committed to Whitfield, right? So there's no legal due process. So anyone who was kind of posing a problem or awkward or, looked at a white woman, if you weren't lynched, then, the hospital or the prison were your options. So, and I think that's borne out too by the fact that we were talking about before about work, that so many of the Black patients were, especially the Black men, were committed to these institutions and then put immediately to work on the field, on massive big cotton plantations, cattle, a slaughterhouse, right? So these are people who are perfectly capable of physical labor. And so what they end up doing is working for the hospital. And if they don't stay at the hospital can't afford to continue to run because their work for the hospital is underwriting the entire system. So the white people, again, are benefiting from the labor of Black patients. Very complicated kind of set of problems there.
Very plantational. Just
Yes.
because we're not doing a therapeutic services, we're running a plantation. We need niggers on the plantations. And it reminded me of Douglas Blackman, Slavery by Another Name,
Yeah.
Georgia. He's guest on our broadcast, but it reminded me of that, where you can just pick up Black people for any Black males in particular. You can just pick them up for any reason, like loitering, get over here, yep, get over here. That's 2 minutes, any sort of thing like that. And now we got a labor force, and you can have them there for an indeterminate amount of time and all the rest of it. And system of white supremacy. What for people who might be a little bit younger, never heard of this, or even people that are older and are ignorant like myself, what is electroshock therapy?
Yeah, so we now call it electroconvulsive therapy. So it is now it's performed only really on people with very treatment resistant depression. It's based on the idea that an electric current through the brain can jolt the brain either into activity away from being depressed, or can suppress symptoms of kind of psychosis. So it was, in very heavy use in these hospitals. It was one of the major forms of treatment, and I put that word in air quotes. And these days, when it's used, it's at a low voltage, and the person is properly sedated and anesthetized, and then they're sent to recovery, and they're monitored by a nurse. But we're talking about use in these hospitals in the thousands of instances, a week, a year, like that, multiple thousands of people receiving electroshock treatment. So they would have been strapped down. They would have had the electrical kind of machine that pushed a current through their head. And it causes a convulsion. And then in the post-convulsion state, you have this kind of lowered affect, or a person is able to maybe speak lucidly. And so it looks like you're dealing with the symptoms of psychosis, and it looks like that you're getting rid of kind of psychotic behavior or out of control behavior. That is the technical kind of scientific explanation. I have other thoughts about ECT.
Wow, it pops up so many times in the text and in so many horrifying ways, really. The first one that kind of sticks out. This is on 33, promoting mental health at the Tuskegee Institute. At the same time, the state's insistence on the delineation between preventive and treatment work demonstrates a kind of paternalism inherent to the state's approach to the black physicians who, by virtue of their blackness, could not possibly be considered more competent than the state's white physicians, even when they obviously were. But it also demonstrates the state's belief in its sole authority to administer somatic treatments to black bodies. Outside the Tuskegee Veterans Association, there was not a single black clinician applying an electric shock machine to black patients. The administration of a painful and violent technology by white clinicians to black patients, and the state's insistence that it was the only entity authorized to undertake the practice was a symbolic and literal reminder of the power of the state to exercise control over black bodies. That's one that stood out to me, just wow. And particularly after you gave us, that's why I was glad I asked that first, to kind of get more information about what all this entails. And then and then you give the numbers of just how, and the thousands of times that this is being administered. Like, that is kind of chilling too. I could see where racists could just, especially as you said, if some of these black people, do they even need to be here other than doing the plantation work? Like, do you even need to be here? And you're getting all of these violent electric shocks as treatment, as you said. Like, whoa. I mean, just, can you kind of speak to, wow, that just seems like it could be a form of sadism, unless I'm reading this incorrectly.
Yeah, no, I don't think you are, and it's probably one of my more contentious statements. I did have a reviewer say to me, "Do you have any proof of that?" And I'm like, "You're asking me whether I have proof of a white person saying, we should be the ones hurting black bodies. Do you really need proof of that?" So, I don't have any written evidence of it being used as a form of cruelty, but I have plenty of, the way I've interpreted its use, I think it was absolutely a form of behavior control. And I will say that I believe it was that for all patients, right? So when you have these big hospitals, if you think about Georgia, there are 13,000 people in that hospital. Electroshock therapy is very good at keeping people quiet. Right? It keeps them quiet because of the effect that it has on their brain, but it also keeps them quiet because they're scared of it. Right? No one wants it. It's a scary technique. It is painful at the time. They weren't being cared for properly around it, and so it was used as a form of behavior control. And I do have evidence of that. These threats that were used, especially against the black women at C.O.W.S Hospital in Alabama, where they were told, if you don't behave, if you talk back, right? And so that's a really strong, this idea of if you sass an attendant or if you talk back to the doctor, you're threatened with ECT. And then it was actually used. So to the extent that about 50% of all the women at C.O.W.S Hospital were undergoing electroshock therapy. And it's really only necessary and only effective, again, on extreme psychosis or very bad depression. So it's a last resort technology now. But at that point, it was a first resort. And I think it was used as a form of, I think it was. I think the white people, when, especially in Alabama, I don't doubt that there was a form of, getting off on it, of it being a form of power and control over people and taking pleasure from being able to hurt people.
Long history of that as well. Context of white supremacy. Our guest live from Australia, Dr. Kylie Smith. You just that getting off on it, which I think this is with these shocks and ECT.
Yeah.
Unless I missed it, I was looking, especially with the comparison to prison, because Douglas Blackman talks about the sodomy and rape of black male prisoners, black boys, black males. All of that is in Slavery by Another Name. That's rampant on the plantation. We've talked about that for a long time. I might have missed it. I didn't see that pop up in the book. I was thinking of what you told us already about the sourcing for all of this. And of course, if I'm the one doing the sexual abuse, maybe we don't record that. But did you find any records of that going on?
Yeah, no, the records were incredibly quiet on anything that I was interested in. So it took me a long time to find one particular document that the American Psychiatric Association had written about as an inspection of the Alabama facilities. And when I did eventually find that document, it was very vague, and it was like, oh, you shouldn't have so many people behind this wall. Maybe take down that wall. It looks like a prison. Maybe you need to get up to date with the latest treatment modalities. But there was no critique of what was actually going on, right? It took the civil rights activists like John LaFleur and the reporters for the Southern Courier to really get into those institutions and do the reporting. So that's where I found the records of abuse and violence against patients, both black and white. But mostly the abuse of black patients was related to them being whipped by white staff. So this is kind of, again, a replication of plantation relations within the hospital. And the white attendants would use whatever technology was at their disposal, including like just literally beating up patients. No psych hospital was a pleasure fair, right? In the 50s and 60s, they're all horrible places, and I say that in the book. I'm not saying that it wasn't happening for white people too, but this is a book about the experience of black patients that we need to understand in the shadow of the plantation. And so it was really overt argument that what you see in these places are, like Douglas Blackman says, slavery by another name, right? And so a lot of those same things are happening. But it was actually really hard to find any records that were related to the explicit abuse of black patients. I really relied on the civil rights activists and the work that they did.
What you just said, it reminded me. She said the whips were used on the black patients, and how plantational all of this is, and kind of you see that same kind of through line, because there are some amazing pictures in the book. Some of them are, wow. You lack a better word. Yeah, exactly. It's got the white man on the horse and the black people picking cotton or corn or whatever crops. Chilling to see. But the pictures in the text are important, and it reminded me. She just when she mentioned the whip, or whatever weapon they can get their hand on to control these black people, shock machine, whatever it is. It reminded me later on in the book. This is chapter 5. She writes, in April 1949, Carter published the results of Senator Campbell's investigation in a series of 4 articles in 1 week. In these articles, written by Senator Campbell himself, details about the level of violence were presented, with numerous stories about the role of attendants in these practices. One story spelled out the existence of a goon squad, a group of patients who were used by attendants to attack other patients, often leaving people to die from their injuries. Attendants themselves were accused of whipping patients, male and female, and on the colored service too. How you gonna whip the staff? Jesus. Campbell's anonymous source reported there was no mention of any shootings of colored patients. However, I believe that could have happened too. But when I read that, it's like I said so many times, it'll be Jesus Christ. There's so much to process. This is in Mississippi. In addition to the whippings, probable shootings. Did you find any evidence of shootings, by the way?
I did, yeah. Yeah. There was one letter written to the NAACP by a white staff member at Mississippi State Hospital, and he said that there is a guy out there who is, and he said it, he named it himself. He said they're making slaves of the colored patients out there. They work them from dawn to dusk, and one of the attendants, Stagg, walks around with a gun and shot a patient's eyes out. And that is the only reference that I found to that. I scoured the Mississippi newspapers trying to find, a story that would support that, and it was never mentioned. But I believe the person who wrote that letter.
Hull Watkins, forgot she starts the chapter with
Hull,
that letter like that. Whew, lots of staggering images, letters, lots all throughout it. That's why I said folks should read this one. But this section from chapter 5, in addition to the whippings and beatings and even recruiting other inmates, and they do this all the time in Mississippi. That reminded me of Fannie Lou Hamer when they arrested her. This is in the 60s. They would get black male inmates to go and beat Fannie Lou Hamer, saying, you don't want to beat this nigger woman? Fine, we'll deal with you later then, and go get somebody else and beat her up or what have you. But when I saw that and they said the story spelled out the existence of a goon squad, I could have passed out. Like, we have done multiple programs in Mississippi. They just had like almost 10 officers get arrested. They called themselves the Goon Squad. They did the exact same thing. Go around, but it was, in fact, it reminded me because I asked about the sexual abuse. The Goon Squad, what did they do? In fact, when did they got busted specifically? This was 2023 summertime. They were arrested. All this became big news. They were told that it was a black male close to Jackson who was in some sort of sexual arrangement with a white woman. They went to his house. It was another black male. They beat them, stripped them naked, made them shower together. They poured chocolate sauce on them, used a dildo on them, shot one of the males in the mouth, all of that. And then they found out that they had a pattern of doing this, and that if you were on the midnight shift, you had to do all of this. And I've seen that this language exactly, goon squads. That is white supremacy history in Mississippi. The insane asylum, the plantation, the police force, probably the school, elementary school, white racist goon squads to control and dominate black people in Mississippi. Oh my God. Like, I can't. Did you see that report about the more recent goon squad in Mississippi?
Yeah, it's really horrible. And you know what is most distressing for me about that, where I found more evidence of it, was later in the 20th century in children's institutions. And so I haven't written about that in this book. It's the subject of my next project, but it's about, youth development centers or industrial training schools, what we would now call, YDCs or juvenile detention. And those goon squads, like they are rampant in those particular institutions where the children really can't fight back, right? And so they prey on this idea that the kids were in gangs on the outside, and so they get them to be in gangs on the inside, and they establish fight clubs, and the staff kind of get off on it and make bets on who's going to beat the shit out of who. Like, it's happening right now in juvenile detention.
Context of white supremacy. Let me see. This is on that same page 64 in chapter 2 I went back to, where you were talking about I didn't even get to read that one yet. In fact, I'll even pause. You talked about the erasure of some of the black psychiatrists who were working Tuskegee and some of the other institutions to try to honestly help black people and do things to correct some of the mental health issues as a result of racism. Are you familiar with the scholarship of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing? Is that name familiar?
The name is familiar, but I can't say I've read anything.
Okay. She wrote a book called The ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors, Black General and Child Psychiatrist, third generation physician. But she passed away at the very beginning of 2016, but she was, I think, she's 82 at that age, but she had spent over 50 years as a general and child psychiatrist writing, lecturing, talking about white supremacy, racism. She talked about her own mistreatment as a black psychiatrist, black female psychiatrist here. She was denied tenure because of her views on racism and what she wrote and what she said about racism, and particularly because she said that because white people were a global minority in terms of population, she said that that was a motivating force for why people who call themselves white practice racism, that got her in lots of trouble, got her fired from a black institution, and she also did her own practice, so she talked to tons of black patients, children, adults, about how they were impacted about racism, and she would talk about that as well, and things that people would tell them about their experience in school, or that she talked to some of the black students who were like the first to go through so-called school integration, and all of the horrors that they endured from racist children and racist teachers and but it reminded me she endured the same erasure where she is not celebrated, she's not talked about, she's not quoted. For you to do a book like this, I would think everyone would be saying, oh my goodness, Dr. Welsing, you've got to go and check out her research.
Yeah.
She talked about, the exact erasure that you talk about. Did anybody tell you about her work while you were doing this project?
No.
Pitiful. To be expected.
Yes, I guess. But I'll go do a little bit of a extra search.
It will be worth it. Amazing work. Black general and child psychiatrist. Exactly. Okay. Same lineage that you're talking about here. This is on chapter 64, page 64. Chapter 2, not that many chapters in the book. Chapter 2, page 64, where you write that poor white and the poor white and black person may have had more in common when it came to admission to Whitfield, this is in Mississippi, than in other arenas of Mississippi life. The omission is also striking because it speaks to a covert recognition of the lie of biological racial difference. In Mississippi, the stakes were about miscegenation, that's non-white people and white people having sex, and recreation of relations of deference and servitude rather than any kind of science. This thinning of the color line at the intersection with psychiatry is particularly telling, revealing the extent to which Jim Crow was indeed a performance in Mississippi in different ways than in Alabama or Georgia. And I read that and I thought, immediately being truthful, what I thought was, man, Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, like, there is no, all of this is pseudoscience. If we want to be truthful about it, all over the world, this is all pseudoscience. It's not Mississippi. All over the world, there is a performance, if we want to use that word, of white supremacy racism that is more about controlling black people, miscegenation, all areas of people activity, as opposed to some sort of, Thomas Jefferson, like that is a major problem all over the world. We have lots of that bedroom integration, but white people still practice racism, white supremacy. Am I making sense?
Yeah, you are. And I think that this is really important in relation to healthcare, right? And scientific knowledge, that there is actually no biological basis for the idea of race itself, right? Like, it's just a matter of phenotype, right? Like hair, skin color. There's no gene that says black or white on it, right? It's ancestry. It's who your family is. And we know this because of the Human Genome Project, right? That proves that all humans across the planet were 99.9% the same, and where we were different, it was not in the piece that you would attribute to race, right? And yet we see scientists and practitioners double down on race right now. Like there is so, well, apart from at the moment in terms of National Institute of Health funding, there is so much that was done around race as a biological category, as if somehow you could solve the problem by focusing on racial biology. And this is, I have all of my students watch Dorothy Roberts' TED Talk on this idea that race is just a bad proxy for other issues. And those issues are usually funding, money, structural kind of problems that we should be paying more attention to, not to issues of biology.
Dorothy Roberts.
Woo, I love her.
Man, oh man. I used to. Oh my goodness. She wrote a brand new book. I don't know if you know about it or not, but she wrote a brand new book. I think it's easily taken second worst book I've ever read, and it might be the worst book I've ever read. It is absolutely, and in fact, it's so bad, it makes me cast a side eye at all of her other scholarship. I've interviewed Dorothy Roberts 3 times. She's been a guest. We talked about Killing the Black Body and Fatal Invention, where she talks about the pseudoscience of racism. We talked about that in depth. Met her in person. She came here and did 2 lectures. It's the worst. But it's not even science. Like even what is the data on why it's not science, Gus? She has the word wonder in that book 73 times, and most of the time it's I wonder, I wonder, I wonder. She has the word imagine in the new book 53 times. This is the same legal scholar who wrote Killing the Black Body. I challenge anyone, find the word imagine in Killing the Black Body or the TED Talk that she just mentioned. I guarantee you imagine is not going to pop up in there. How is that? Oh my, I could go on and on and on. She defends her racist peeping Tom dad. Like, it is loathsome there's absolutely nothing redeemable about it at all. It is it might be the worst book I've ever read. I have to still think on that. I have a couple chapters left to go, but woo, Dorothy Roberts, the mighty have fallen. Like that's going to be the first thing that I think of from now on every time. It is so awful. Like, oh my. Anyway, I have to talk about that later, but
okay.
And because it's being marketed as a challenge to white supremacy. If they had just put it out at it's Black History Month. It's on top of all of that. It's being marketed as a challenge to white supremacy, and for Black History Month, when she admits in the book she refuses to interrogate her peeping Tom racist dad. She won't even interrogate the fact that her dad married her black mom. Her dad was a professor. Her mom was a student. She admits she's too cowardly even to... I'm sorry, I did it wrong. Her dad was a white professor.
Yeah.
Her mom was a black female student. And she admits she's too cowardly to even interrogate that honestly.
It tells you something about the times we are in, doesn't it?
It would be any time, because I've seen this sort of unwillingness to be honest about white supremacy racism throughout the existence of white supremacy racism. But wow, if that's going to be our Black History Month gift, worst book ever. Like 50 thumbs down for Dorothy Roberts. But anyway, anyway, gotta move on. I was reading that book concurrently while I was reading your book, so that's been heavily in my brain computer every day, and in lots of ways. And they've shoved it down my throat, like it's been on the news and lots of places. Any hoodles. Getting back to your book, I also have been focused on. Back to chapter 2, the same page, just dropping down to that paragraph. You write, When the official reports accounted for segregation, they did so in order to assure policymakers and legislators that the norms of Southern life were being maintained in the asylum and that all possible measures were being taken to keep black patients away from white patients. This practice was a performance of the Jim Crow routine in that it did actually keep black patients away from white patients, thus reassuring the white public and family members, but it also served to reinforce ideas about the supposed risk posed to white fragility by the mad black person and enabled practices based on the so-called eugenic threat and danger of the black patient when confined with white patients. Just because the phrase popped up here, who would be the fragile white person in this here text, Jim Crow in the Asylum? Who would that be?
Well, anyone who I think is paying taxes in the state of Mississippi. I have lots of evidence of people writing to Senator John Stennis complaining about impending integration because of the Civil Rights Act, and then how Medicare funding was threatened if they didn't integrate hospitals, right? So there's a lot of people, a lot of public correspondence from white folks who are like, I don't want these communists telling me what I can do with my taxes, and I don't want my taxes being spent on black people, and I don't want my grandmother to be in the same hospital as a black patient, blah, blah, blah. But also there's this particular performance, I think, in Mississippi around this idea, and it's the way that segregation is justified, right? By saying, well, everyone likes it like this. And it's good because everyone is happy and everyone knows their place. So, and not only does everyone know their place, but the black folks are happy in their place. And so a lot of what I saw happening at Whitfield Hospital was this kind of benevolent paternalism, right? Like, we do look after our black patients, and here they're happy, and they get watermelon on Sundays, and this kind of, rhetoric about we're looking after them because they're sick and they're in a mental hospital. But at the same time, they're not receiving the same type of care, the same amount of care, and they're shoved over on one side of the hospital, and they don't have their own canteen, and they don't get to have Christmas Day celebrations, right? So there is this performance about we need to make sure that even the way we run a psych hospital echoes the way segregation works in broader Mississippi. Like, when a white person is walking on the footpath, you had better get down in the gutter, right? That kind of thing is much more prevalent in Mississippi than in the other states that I looked at.
Wow. Wow. I don't know why I had that visualization. I guess I saw myself having to hop off the sidewalk for a white child, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Wow. That stuck with me for a second. I did ask Dr. Smith the fragile white person in your response. One group, the people who are saying, hey, man, I don't want our tax dollars to be going to no communists or no niggers trying to go to they don't sound fragile. They just sound like racist. So we knock them out. Then the group that's saying, well, wait a minute, now we're going to lose out on Medicaid if you all don't integrate, and they decide to withhold funds. That also violates what I said with the question, because I said, who are the fragile white people in this book? They're not in the book. So, again, who would be the fragile white people in the book?
Yeah, the other group, and it's kind of funny that I would call them fragile, but I do think the Sovereignty Commission and, those kind of real extreme white supremacists, like the Klan, to me, they seem very fragile. Like, and I don't mean that in a good way. I mean that they're kind of pathetic because they're so worried about whether or not a black woman is going to hand a towel to a white nurse. Like, literally, that is what the Sovereignty Commission looked for when it did an inspection of Whitfield. And I just can't see that as anything, like, in a way, I guess I'm psychoanalyzing, people who get around in a white sheet, right? To me, that is just a kind of pathetic loser fragility, like that you don't even have the courage of your convictions, and that's probably a misinterpretation, but that is who I'm talking about. And they were so upset about mental health, right? They had so many weird thoughts about mental health care as a form of brainwashing and all of that kind of stuff. That probably doesn't answer your question either.
I'm just processing. I mean, the Sovereignty Commission. If someone asked me to pick out the fragile people in this here text that we're talking about, Jim Crow and the Asylum, the white people that are a part of any of these sovereignty commissions where they go out with suits on, not robes and sheets sometimes, to terrorize black people and do it efficiently and maybe over the phone or with a letter or what have you. Yeah. I would not pick them out as the first group to say that they are fragile, meaning weak or easily damaged. Like, it would be really the only person that I could think of that might even be close is Hull Watkins. Might be the only person who is saying, hey, don't use my name, don't identify me. They are shooting niggers' eyeballs out up here. It's terrible. You need to send help. The niggers are total slaves, but don't tell them it was me because I get in trouble with it. He might be about the only person that I could say might, and that's because I mean, he could just lie. He's white. He has a lot more, advantages and all this than a black person. My view, as she said, even all that twisting, and we got to do a psychoanalysis. White people are not fragile. They are the most powerful people in the universe, and that, in my opinion, is a part of the deception. They keep using these old misnomers and deceptive terms. Fragile. No white person is fragile in this book. Like, Miss Hurston is fragile. Her son is 11. He is fragile.
Absolutely. I totally take your point. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And I think I am using fragile in a particular way there, which I think I probably mean cowardly, right? And so I think you're right about Hull Watkin, and I do. And I think in the rest of that sentence, I say something about white moderates, right? And I know I'm supposed to give them some sort of grace, but I found them disappointing in this period. Like, I was disappointed in Hodding Carter Jr., right, the editor of the Delta Democrat, the Greenville Times, right, and that even he wasn't able to go the full, like, this is bad. Like, he was one of the people who had letters smuggled out to him. He knew how bad it was there, and he never really confronted the actual issue because he was a moderate in terms of civil rights. And even, Jack Nelson later in 1959 in Georgia, a wonderful, wonderful journalist writing for the Atlanta Constitution at the time, and published 66 articles about the horrors of Central State Hospital in Georgia. And of those 66, only 6 were about conditions for black folks, right? So there is a failure throughout, and the only civil rights activists who had any courage were the black folks, right? And then Freedom Summer, people involved in Freedom Summer. So they all let it happen.
Go back to my question. What does it mean to be white? I'm glad you brought that term up because I did have that in my notes, white moderate. And that's one anytime I hear a white, because generally I generally only hear other people who are classified as white use the term white moderate. And so I generally ask, because it's a term I don't use, I ask, what is a white moderate? But I had to remember, I already asked you, are all white people racist? You said yes, eventually.
Yeah.
And so now I get to white moderate. If all white people are racist, what is a white moderate?
Yeah. I mean, I'm using a term that was used kind of by other historians, other scholars. And they talk about this kind of political group or activist group of white folks who are pro-civil rights, right, but not willing, like Hull Watkin or like newspaper editors, not necessarily willing to go all out on it, right? And we still see it now, this kind of like, gradual change is what's required. We believe in the same rights for everyone. We just don't want to like rush things right now. All of that kind of, that's what other historians have called white moderates, that they're technically, pro civil rights, but they don't necessarily want to see massive social upheaval. And I personally don't like the term. I think, like you're rightly saying, you're still a bit of a coward, right? Like they're not actually activists.
You do. You do use the term white moderates in the text, and it's not in quotes on page 126. That was where I had it highlighted because I was going to ask about it, but you brought it up.
Yeah.
But it is there. It's not in quotes, so that's your term, and that's what I mean. Like, if
Yeah,
you're going
yeah.
to use it not in quotes, everybody doesn't have the same term, or it doesn't have the same definition for white moderate, and that's one. If you have, if you say, "Hey, all white people are racist," that includes me. I need to have a non-white person review this to see if my, as you call it, positionality as a white person. That would have been one I would have said too. If that's what that means, all white people are racist, and I'm white and I'm racist, and I'm still doing this work, I think it would have been better to say it that way. That just makes it a lot more explicit. Then no white fragility, no white moderates, because I mean, at minimum, white moderates is confusing. And if all white people are racist, like what? Come on. We're confusing non-white people and making it seem like not all white people are racist. And there are a lot of white people who pretend that they're against racism. Just take your time. You're just pushing too fast. Just wait. Come on. You're racist, and come on. Let's use correct terms. Liberalism, white liberal is another one. It's been Malcolm X criticized that. Yeah, we just had February 21. Minister Malcolm X criticized the term white liberal in the same way that I'm doing for white moderate now. 60 years ago. So just throw all those terms away. What does it mean to be white? Racist. And now we can move forward. And that helps explain why we haven't got this problem solved. Even beyond the giggling, that helps us explain why we haven't got this problem solved. The white people are racist. This is what they want. Oh, okay. We don't have white homies and friends who are working hard. No, that's not even true. They like this. The white, they come and scold you. What did she say? Baby, it was, you just don't understand. We had these no-count niggers and they're not even upset about it. They did what they had to do. Like, anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me see. The work, oh man, I thought that was so important. Plantation, she has, if you don't do anything, like, this is a new book, so if you don't do anything but get this book to look at some of the pictures, you can see some of the black psychiatrists at Tuskegee in Alabama who are trying to do the correct thing. You can see the plantational scene we talked about before with the white race soldier. He's got his horse. I don't know if you see the gun, but I'm sure it's there. He's on his horse. You see all the black people out doing, you pick the crop, corn, whatever. But it's got lots of picture. You see some of what these asylums look like and how they kept the black patients away from the white patients. Lots of really important, and even some data in there sometimes. But they have, make sure they have a picture. Got lost. Oh, and they have even some of the newspaper articles that I stopped to read. I thought that was really important as well. But you have, when it gets to the section about the work, it makes it so plantational in terms of the function of all of this. I want to make sure I get to 106, get the page number correct here. So there we go. So I can share with listeners the portion how I talk about that all the time, how this reminds me of the whole MAGA and Make America Great Again and hearkening back to the grand old times. This is it, like, exactly. This is not 106, it's page 92 in chapter 4, Negotiating Daily Life. This is going back to the letter at the beginning of the chapter going back to the letter at the beginning of the chapter from Mr. M. And he talks about how much work he does. Oh, this is one from one of the black people where he talks about how he has to work 5.5 days a week. And he's just begging for assistance from anyone at the NAACP if he can just get him any sort of help to get him out of here. Some of the great letters that she has to begin the chapters. But she writes, Mr. M's letter is revealing in important ways that set the scene for this chapter. Its existence in the NAACP records indicates both the possibilities and the difficulties of resistance and agency for black patient scarcity of the records that document the lived experience of everyday life. The content of Mr. M's letter gives us a glimpse of that reality, highlighting the way that black patients were seen as a biddable workforce rather than as a patient population requiring treatment. This positioning revealed a particular paradox in the history of institutionalization overlaid with the history of eugenics. If black patients were considered disposable enough to be institutionalized, they were not considered disabled enough to avoid hard labor. This labor and the way that black patients were treated on a daily basis replicated and reinforced the performance of Jim Crow relations. Mr. M made those relations clear. They were the relations of work, not therapy. I think that theme gets hammered over and over again, as it should be. The pictures maybe do a better job than even, the most articulate scholar in the world could do. Just a white man on a horse, probably with a gun, and you've got a hoe. That's about all that. This is your therapy for them to get to. And this work is the backbone of some of these mental health facilities. I think that's so important. Can you give us more detail, Dr. Smith?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of scholarship about the use of work in psych hospitals, and it often is unchallenged, right? A lot of historians say, well, this is a valid technique, it's occupational therapy, or it's vocational rehabilitation, or, it's better that patients have something to do than just sit around all day. But I was struck, as you were, with the photos. So, and that is one of the photo from Alabama and it literally says overseer, right? Which is a plantation term, sitting on a horse, looking over a group of patients working a field. And the photo itself is from 1940 something, and I really was just well, this could be 1840 something. I just really literally don't see the difference. And it was interesting, though, the kind of pushback that I did have from other historians who were well, all patients were put to work. And I'm yes, and this is something else. And so that's why it was really important for me to think about this link between the plantation and these psych hospitals. Some of those hospitals are actually literally built on the site of an old plantation, right? So it's just the same relations, the same work relations, the same human relations with a new name on the gate. And I just really didn't see any difference between the plantation and the way that the black men in particular were being put to work on those fields. And not only that, I think it's really important to note that they're making a profit for those hospitals, right? Those hospitals could not have functioned without that work. And the hospitals sold the output of those farms. And so they also then underwrote local agriculture, right? And so the psych patients are actually basically underwriting cotton, oat, corn production in certain parts of Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia for quite some time. And it wasn't until the Civil Rights Act that those farms were ended. And even then there were problems. I found right at the end of the book, I write about a bunch of men who were found in 1977 working on local farms in Georgia, and they had been furloughed from the hospital maybe 20, 30 years before, and they'd just been completely lost, and they were working on little white people's, little allotment type farms, and they were just underwriting kind of local production. So to me, it was really important to show the ways that was enabled, not because they didn't care, or not just because the superintendent was racist, but because those were normal patterns of production, of labor production, and they served multiple purposes for those states.
Just so listeners don't accuse me of being a patriarchal, privileged black male host, I thought you had a really powerful section as well, talking about the use of black female labor, not just making clothes and the sewing together the straight jackets that they use, vital materials that they used in these facilities, but you talked about I don't know if it's in the book, but you talked about the image of it is a white staff member, and she has all black female staff, and they're in the kitchen. When this is also talking about a vital component, because you got to have food, you got all these people here, and so they're in the kitchen and they're preparing the black female patients. They're preparing food, and you pointed out like, man, there are no white female patients, even though they have white female patients at this institution. It is exclusively black female patients who do the kitchen work. Even that, we are Aunt Jemima, Uncle, well, I can't even say Uncle Ben because it's just black female. So we are Aunt Jemima right back on the plantation. And you pointed out how that is so deliberate if you're just going to get the black females to do this work. And what we're really saying here, am I recapturing what you said in articulate manner?
Absolutely. And it was a really important point. And when I saw the photos first, and I didn't have any context for the photo. I found the photo in a scrapbook of the superintendent at Whitfield, Dr. Jakewith. And it was just this big black and white photo. I'm like, what is going on here? What is this white? It was like a scene out of The Help, right? With, like white woman sitting at a table, and there are these two women dressed in white behind her, and they're looking very uncomfortable, and they're handing her like pieces of food and stuff. And then it turns out that it's the superintendent's wife who can't cook. And so she uses black women patients to teach her to cook, and then she reproduces their recipes, and then she publishes those recipes in a local newspaper. And when she's asked about how does she maintain, a kitchen, she says, my girls, and she's referring to these patients who are not her girls. Like, let me be clear, they are patients. And they have absolutely no agency in this situation. There is no capacity for them to say, hey, white lady, I'm here to get well, not to come and work in your damn kitchen. But there she has them working in her kitchen. And it is really probably one of the most distressing photos I saw. And I did not reproduce the photo because the women, they have no ability to control the use of their own image. And they were actually named in the newspaper article. And so I just chose to describe the photo itself, but it's a very, very powerful photo.
That is really, pause, delectable Negro, human consumption, homoeroticism, and U.S. slave culture. I could have mentioned that book about 50 times while reading this. That right there, what you just said, Dr. Smith, is why that is the number one book. Grasping Racism, White Supremacy, Total System, What It Means to Be White. So it touches on so many components. Yeah. Even that right there. And then they put their names and their patients.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Other than the mental health facility component, that is right out of the fictional racist tripe, The Help, where you go and the white woman gets like, wow, that's, man.
Yeah. Awful.
And what you talked about where the black females, and I appreciate the logic about why you did not reproduce that image, but they lack the agency to say, hey, we're not doing any recipes, we're not doing this, I'm just focusing on my mental health so I can get the hell out of here as fast as possible. They lack the agency to do that in the entire structure of white supremacy racism, and you make that a major theme, I thought, of the entire text. You write, this is 95, kind of the bottom, you write that the black people of the Delta, that he pictures Negroes as faithful and loyal to the white race in his first volume of the patient-led newsletter, in which no black patients are themselves represented. The tone is set by a white patient repeating the words of a white author. The themes that Willie H. identifies as important from Cohn's book give some identification of the broader environment that black patients needed to negotiate at Whitfield, where faithfulness and loyalty also became markers of both good behavior and sanity itself. Relationships of paternalism and deference shaped the everyday life of black patients at Whitfield, as well as the way that patients advocated for improved conditions and for their own release. I thought that was so significant because it just what you said. I mean, hey, you just have to accept whatever they say. Okay, we're going to, I guess, go to her house and cook and do these recipes. But when you talked about even maybe you get an opportunity to say something in the newspaper, what have you. It has to be, we're so thankful for the food that we've got today, and oh man, we're so thankful that we got the fried chicken on Sunday, and it was just the best. And maybe we could get something extra to eat on Wednesday, but we were so great and just thankful, and man, it was awful. And we just thanked the staff so much that, wow, it's like you talk about perform. Is this what you have to do to perform that? Okay, maybe this isn't a crazy Negro. We can let you out now. Like, woo, I cannot even imagine.
Yeah. It's really, I think that's really a core argument of the book, and it's probably like a key point, that to be considered sane is to comply with everything that white supremacy tells you, right? Like, and so then even when you want to fight back and you want to speak the truth and you're trying to talk about feeling oppressed or, you know, persecuted, that becomes a symbol of your mental illness. Like, under one category of schizophrenia, there's this idea about delusions, right? And the criteria say delusions of persecution. So, you know, if you're a black person in a psych hospital in the 1960s and you want to say I'm depressed because, you know, white people are oppressing me, you're just automatically classified as psychotic, right? So there's just no win, right? And a lot of the psychiatric processes are about the power of the white psychiatrist in a white coat to decide whether you're, you know, interacting appropriately and whether your behavior is appropriate, and that is what's going to get you released or not. So when I say they had no agency, that's kind of not true, because in fact they made a choice to do what Mrs. Jaquith asked them to do, knowing that it was probably their best bet for eventually being released.
Jeez. Unless you get lost like some of those black males, and maybe they find you 20 years later, or maybe they don't. For listeners, it seemed, unless I didn't read it correctly, it seemed like this was not like an anomaly. Like, it seemed like some of these black patients / inmates / slaves were taken home to staff's houses and, you know, hey, do my laundry or cook the food or whatever, you know, and then they bring you back.
Yeah, that was uncovered in Alabama in particular by John LaFleur. And he discovered this system of what he just called leasing out, right? So this kind of convict leasing system, except they're not convicts. So, you know, not only were white staff able to take a patient home and do domestic work in their house, but local residents could apply to the hospital to have someone come and work for them for a day. And at no point, obviously, did the patient make any money out of that. Like, the actual hospital made money from that.
Wow. That is slavery by another name. Wow. And we're now incentive to say that, wow, Leroy, you just haven't made no progress at all. We're going to have to evaluate you again in 6 months.
Exactly.
I mean, man.
Exactly.
Jeez.
Yeah. And that's why people would end up being there for like Mr. M, you know, the letter that you started with, he'd been there for 9 years. But when the Atlanta Constitution came through Central State Hospital in 1959, they found people who'd been there for 40 years. Perfectly lucid, and had asking about people back in their hometown, and, you know, having to be told, well, actually everyone's died. So, yeah.
Black male privilege, as they say. Before we let you enjoy the rest of your, I guess, Monday afternoon, the black staff were not immune from all of this. That pops up in here repeatedly. This is on 185. A little later on in the text, you write, the charged atmosphere around Mount Vernon and Searcy continued a week later. The Mobile Beacon ran another front-page story titled "Skirmish at Searcy Hospital Causes Stir." In this article, the Beacon reported that a black employee, Willie Mays Jr., had been dismissed from Searcy because of an altercation with a white employee over the treatment of a patient. Mr. Mays, who worked in the kitchen at Searcy, reported that if it was feed up time, and one of the male patients was seated at the table with his hat on, this white man said, "What you doing with your hat on, boy?" And judo chopped the patient as he snatched his hat. I called him where I was and said, "You shouldn't hit the patients like that." He said, "What you got to do with it?" and slapped me across the face. My eye is still bloodshot. Then I went into him. Both men were fired, and Dr. Rowe was unavailable for comment. But the local community saw the incident as part of a larger series of racially charged incidents. A number of area citizens converged on the hospital in protest at Mr. May's firing and the violence against patients, but were threatened with a call to the police chief. The article made a clear link between this incident and the Klan, stating at the end that because of recent Klan activity in the area, it is reported that most Negroes have armed themselves. I thought that was important for so many reasons, even to get that, talk about agency right on. But I thought that was important too, that not just this white domination and plantation atmosphere with the patients, but the staff as well, like what, just all of that. Because you have a lot of reports of black staff as well, even including the doctors we started with at Tuskegee.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're a missing part of the story. And it was actually really hard to find anything about them because, again, the records are very quiet and the official archives are very, what you would call race neutral, right? And so when they're reporting staff, if those records have been kept, which is not always the case. So people think, oh, you've walked into an archive and there's a complete set of materials. That's not true. I really had to come at it from a number of different angles. And so there's no staff ratios or there's no list of staff names. So it's hard to tell, but you get these little glimpses like that particular story of the fact that there are black attendants working there and there were black nurses at George's Hospital as well. They did really important work there. But it is, again, really important to put their work also in the context of resistance to civil rights, right? And so they're trying to work and they're trying to provide care for their community members, and then they have to deal with this terrible behavior, and then you have a Klan rally down the street and a cross burning outside a hospital, and you're just like, what the hell is going on? So I think it's really important. I really wanted to try and situate these hospitals. They are not separate from the broader context in which they exist. They are very much shaped by both the long history of the plantation and the long history of civil rights, right? And also massive resistance to civil rights. So, and that is the context. They're not neutral. Then because they're a medical facility doesn't mean they're not political, right? They're highly political at every level for everyone who's trying to just work in them or survive them, right? Like these are just places that you're lucky if you survived, even as a worker. But I love that story about Willie Hayes. I love him. He's my hero.
Oh, that agency. Hey, agency is inspiring. Hey, especially, and that's what I mean. Willie Mays Jr. is fragile, but he still chose to fight back. That's what I'm saying. Like that would be a correct application of the term. But
you are correct. Yeah.
That notwithstanding, I learned a ton with this book. Surprisingly, like I was not. I guess I didn't really have in mind. Like it just seemed interesting. Jim Crow and the Asylum, and they do have a lot of crazy Negro stories. But wow, this is a fascinating book. Especially anybody, if you have like connections to Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and or the mental health field, even if you don't have connections to those specific geographic locations, if you're in mental health yourself, psychiatry, psychology, or whatever, you should nab this book. It is very informative about the system of white and just dedication within this field, dedication to white supremacy racism. That is a big theme. The full title of the book again, Jim Crow in the Asylum, Psychiatry and Civil Rights in the Aftermath in the American South. I got aftermath. Psychiatry and Civil Rights in the American South. Our guest been joining us live back on the other side of the world, Dr. Kylie M. Smith. It has been a hoot. Thank you so much for hanging out, sharing a bit of your Monday afternoon with us. We'll have to, she has new scholarship or future scholarship coming. So once you get the next book done on racism and the little folks that are being confined, we will be looking forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for the really great conversation. Really wonderful.
Learned a lot. Take care. Keep up the research, and we'll be looking forward to your next book, Dr. Smith.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Right on. Enjoy.
Bye.
Context of white supremacy, global system. Our guest joining us live from Australia, Dr. Kylie Smith. Again, the book 2026 publication, Jim Crow in the Asylum, Psychiatry and Civil Rights in the American South. That might even be two very recent books that both should have had Dr. Welsing in them. I asked Dr. Smith. She said nobody even mentioned Dr. Welsing's scholarship to her, and putting a book together about 20th century psychiatry and racism in the U.S. No Dr. Welsing. And this is a book Dr. Welsing would have loved, because she talked about some of these exact same themes. She even talked about some of this on one of her 31 visits, a few times, in fact. She talked about how in the field of psychiatry, what Dr. Smith said, psychiatry is not for niggers. At most, we confine, and then we will dope them up so they can't do no raping, can't do no thinking either. And we'll just dope them up and, put them in a closet someplace, dungeon someplace type of a thing. Anywho, we will nab Mr. Fuller talking about this exact same subject matter. I do want to go and do research to see if I can locate the State Institution for the Colored, Taft, in OKC. If I can track that down, get any information. If anybody can research, that would be grand. We'll take a quick break. Context of white supremacy.
We had the State Institution for the Colored.
Oh, man.
In Taft, Oklahoma, which is about 8 miles from my hometown, Muskogee, quote unquote hometown, and it was Governor Wagner who was firmly associated with the Ku Klux Klan, but he said, "Hey, we got so many crazy niggas in this state. We just can't have them wandering all over the place. So we're going to build an institution for the colored, for the crazy niggas around here. Because we got just so many of them. Because it was, insanity, as they call it today, was very prevalent. Under those conditions, you couldn't help but be insane. It was a common thing. So they built that, institution. Taft, institution for the insane, for the coloreds, right? And I guess it's still there. I don't know. Probably doesn't have that name anymore. But that's what it was for. Kind of way out in the middle of nowhere. They sent lots of black people to that institution at Taft. Because I guess he looked at it like a mercy thing, because with so many black people, sheriffs was killing them, and some crazy guy that's walking down the street, foaming at the mouth and talking to himself, and I guess they knew how wrong they were. To shoot somebody like that, this cold turkey. Of course, they would do it for a whole lot of them. But I guess it was just so much of it that they decided to build an institution for it and go ahead and pay the money. And it was Governor Wagner that did it, because I guess he more or less looked at it, well, hey, Ain't no way in the world a nigga wouldn't be crazy, you know, with what we put on them. So let's have a little place for them, that's those that go over the edge, who are no good at all. We can't get no work out of them or nothing. And just let them vegetate. But there's a lot of them that wasn't in the institution, you know, maybe should have been. From time to time, I was one of them.
I'm in that club too. And I would have never even thought about that. That until I became more informed about racism, I would have never. If someone had came to me and said, you know, do you think there are a significant number of black people, maybe all of them, who are suffering from mental illness because of racism?
Oh, man. You know. Hey, you know, you had to be. You had to be. You had to be crazy if you wasn't mentally ill. I mean, you know. I mean, in other words, to think that you were sane. You know, you were mentally ill. Of course, there ain't no way in the world you could be sane with that mess going on. I put it in my book. You might have spotted it in there somewhere. Yeah. All victims of white supremacy are insane, even to this day. They just don't know it. You know, you're in a crazy situation. That thing about, you know, we're going to rehabilitate you. There ain't no way in the world that can happen in this system. Readjust to insanity? White supremacy is an insane system. It's just, you know, it doesn't manifest itself in a way that people understand that that's what it is. Because they're raised up in it. Like, you know, a fish born in water is not aware of the water. But we're as crazy as we can be, even to this day. But it used to be back in the old days, it was just very, very acute. It affected people. Man, it had to. Just beaten down every day. No let up. Always in fear. See, being always in fear is a form of insanity. Just that alone. Sometimes it has that just a reverse effect from the fear. Like it was a lady named Rabbit. That was a nickname. I never knew her full name, her real name, or the name she used. They call her Rabbit. Her last name was Hawkins. She was one of the Hawkins sisters. One day, under that kind of pressure and whatnot of the whole setup, she just started laughing and couldn't stop. They had doctors come and whatnot. Rabbit just started laughing and couldn't stop. She was talking to her sister, and the sister had a nickname, Dimples. And they were talking about some incident that had happened downtown where she worked or someplace. And to keep from crying, she started off crying, and then to keep from crying, she just started laughing and couldn't stop. And the last I know of her, she would just laugh, nonstop, just laugh, gone completely, you know, completely acutely insane. That's what I call it. Couldn't change nothing. Looked like it was going to always be. Just couldn't take it no more. She'd finally, what she'd do, she'd laugh, and then finally just, you know, little by little stop laughing and drift off to sleep because she'd get sleepy. And when she would wake up, she'd be okay for a little while, and then start laughing again. And that's the last I remember of her. They couldn't stop her from laughing. That's all she did. Just laughed all the time. Sometimes it would be real loud, sometimes just almost like a murmur, but she'd be laughing. And it was her environment, that racist environment. Very intelligent lady. You know, very sensitive. Just couldn't take it no more.
Context of white supremacy. Neely Fuller Jr., ProduceJustice.com. Any hoodles, we will be here tomorrow, 8 p.m. Or not our normal broadcast time. Not our normal broadcast time. We'll be here tomorrow, so it's 1 a.m. Excuse me, 1 p.m. Get it right. Monday we'll be here 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central, 10 a.m. Pacific. There we go. We'll be here Monday, February 23, to discuss white supremacy, racism in Venezuela. I cannot wait. And even our discussion on Venezuela, I'd been trying to have that program for some time. I had to reschedule and all this. And I mean, they're still talking about what's happening with Maduro and the whole invasion. So it's still important. But and we still haven't solved the problem. So still important. But yes, we'll be looking forward to tomorrow. That will help me be up and motivated, energized, bright and early Monday for me. Monday morning, if you're on the East Coast, it'll just be very early in the afternoon, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. 1 a.m. p.m. Excuse me, I said it again, 1 a.m. 1 p.m. It's 1 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. I'm not accustomed to having to do a broadcast time where it's both AM, PM, depending on where you are, which is what we had today too. She was 11 a.m. for Dr. Smith when we started out. So, man, they are making my puny Negro brain work. I sure enough would be locked up and all kinds of electroshocked if we were in Mississippi, Alabama, maybe even right here in Washington State. I will say, before we get back to Dr. Smith, what I learned, closing thoughts, prep for tomorrow. Man, she mentioned Dorothy Roberts. Everybody has VGQ, Victims Guaranteed Qualified. Everybody. The problem is white people. Reading is more important than watching television. It is the truth. And in fact, I probably would have had an easier time prepping and conducting the broadcast today if I had not been reading Dorothy Roberts' book at the same time, because it's a kind of a denser book. It's not just like 10 pages or something. But I was reading these books concurrently, and our report for tomorrow as well. Man. And even pause. Our guest was joining us from Australia. She writes about issues of racism in the U.S. She spent years here. Granted, she's going to pay attention to things that happen here. I'm sure she heard Dorothy Roberts' name while she was hanging out here studying racism. That said, Dorothy Roberts has been all over the TV for Black History Month, promoting a book where white people say this book is a challenge to white supremacy. What book are they saying? The Mixed Marriage Project, a memoir of love, race, and family. Now, you can even just get with that L word. And mixed marriage. That right there, Fuller recommends not using that word. If it's got to be put it in quotes, but mixed marriage should not be used. It reifies the racial classification, suggesting that there is such a thing as black, white, and the children will be so-called mixed. All of that is a lie, which we heard from our guest. It's just whatever white people say for the racial classifications. Whatever they say, they make it up. But that's the new book from Dorothy Roberts, Victim of White Supremacy, who does have one white parent, which is what this book is all about, and dominantly focused on her one white parent. Make sure I give the receipts, because I said this book, and it is true. So, and even this book has certainly replaced Isabel Wilkerson's Case as the second worst book of all time at minimum. And this would mean if Dorothy Roberts' new book becomes the worst book of all time, that would also mean Isabel Wilkerson is no longer the second worst book ever. She would be bumped down to third, and Alice Sebold would be bumped down to second. People who are following along with my worst books of all time list. But that's how bad this book is. Like, historically bad. The receipts for what I just said, where she is too cowardly to interrogate her white professor dad marrying her black female student mom. Chapter 13, Seeking a Haven. She writes, I realize now that this whole time I have granted my parents a mercy I have denied to the interracial couples they studied. I have not examined the role that race played in their marriage with the same scrutiny I have applied to interracial relationships more broadly. I have barely questioned the ethics of my father pursuing a romance. Words. With my mother when she was a student. My white father pursuing a black student. My reluctance comes from knowing the depth of their love for each other, that word again, and from my love for both of them, that word again. And I mean, really, I could read you a bunch of other substantially more egregious passages. I mean, even you can just take what she said right there. When she talks about being scrutinizing other so-called interracial couples and such, this most frequently applies to black males who are feverish. She even, in fact, she uses the film. She says, you know what told me I was right about all this, and you feverish, no-count black males who probably need to be in the asylum. They got that American classic, Undercover Brother. I said, the film with Eddie Griffin? This is, wait a minute. Is this the same Dorothy Roberts who wrote Fatal Invention? Is this the same Dorothy Roberts who wrote Killing the Black Body? Is this the same Dorothy Roberts who did the TED Talk Dr. Smith mentioned? Your evidence to corroborate your theory about the no-count goodness of black males and them being feverish, undercover brother. For Black History Month, undercover brother. The white woman is your kryptonite, Leroy. Man, it might be the new worst book ever. It is so unscientific. It is so unscientific. It is so, I can't say it enough times. It is so unscientific. How unscientific is it? Again, I'm doing the word count for people who've listened. Catherine Massey Book Club every Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. I have done this for years. How unscientific is it? The word imagine is in this book 53 times. We might even, do you want to be real ignorant? Let's be real ignorant. Let's count how many times. We'll pick a book. Fatal Invention. Fatal Invention sounds real sciencey, so we'll take Killing the Black Body, and let's see how many times the word imagine pops up. Maybe it's in here, dozens of times too. Maybe that's just a part of the way that she talks. Let's see. Find out with the rest of you guys. Let's see. Alrighty, so in Killing the Black Body, see if I can get a page count in a book that is 565 digital pages, and in the Mixed Marriage Project, which is 498 digital pages. The word imagine is in Mixed Marriage Project 53 times. The word imagine is in Killing the Black Body 12 times. Bigger book, substantially fewer usages. And even, I don't even see, it's not even used in the same context. Like the first time, I cannot imagine. That is substantially different from the way it's used consistently in mixed marriages. I imagine that my white dad did something to work against white supremacy. That type of thing, over and over, and call it reckless speculation. That's what they call that old recky specky. See? Anyway. I have much more to say about all this, and I've noted this before, white people will push projects that are confusing. The book we talked about today, I think, a lot of accurate information about what it means to be white. Got that white fragility in there too, but a lot of, accurate information about dedication to white supremacy racism. That is not in the Mixed Marriage Project. And they're telling people that this book is working against racism. No, it's not. No, it's not. It makes me question. The reason it might be the worst book of all time, this book is so bad it makes me question all of her other scholarship. Same thing happened with Caste, which Caste is mentioned in this book, Mixed Marriage. Abomination completely. Anyway, Peeping Tom, and it's defending a racist Peeping Tom. Defending a racist Peeping Tom. Defending a racist Peeping Tom. Dr. Kylie Smith, in her book, Jim Crow in the Asylum. I do think white supremacy in the Asylum would have been slight improvement. Maybe not even slight, but that would have been my suggestion, but I can get for the time period and all of that. But I think white supremacy, that is timeless, classic, accurate white supremacy in the Asylum. The portion where she talked about the electroshock therapy, in my view, that is just straight. I am so excited. I'm never going to miss a day off work. I'm going in every day. I'm going to shock them niggers good. Ooh-wee. I don't care if Leroy doing better, he doing worse. We got him yesterday. Ooh-wee. How long you supposed to do that? Who knows? How do you know if they're getting better? Who cares? They got whips. Go and lash. Nick got the goon squad. Sometimes we sit around and watch the other inmates beat, and they're not inmates. I apologize. They're patients. Sometimes we sit around and watch the patients beat the other patients. Goon racist activity. And if you hear all of that, you know it's got to be all kinds of sexual terrorism going on. Got to be. They terrorize and mistreat the staff too, so I mean we got to be sexually terrorizing everybody, males and females. They were making them make moonshine on at some of the facilities, so I mean, come on. Anyway, the portion where she at the very beginning of the book says, I'm a white person writing this book and have to acknowledge my position there and blah blah blah. And I asked her about that on the program, and I said, man, it makes it seem like all white people are racist. And eventually when she got around and said, yes, all white people are racist, including her. Man, that right. There are many, maybe all non-white people who say, Gus T., you are in error. You sit around and waste all this time for 17 years talking to white people from all over the universe, trying to convince us that all white people are racist. That's kind of insulting to our body of work. I mean, we have a book club, so. Anyway, the main thing, though, one we should always evaluate for, is that true? And the other is, I bump into a lot of non-white people who have confidently concluded not all white people are racist. VGQ. They have come to this conclusion where they didn't do any scientific study of white people. They didn't go, I'm going to talk to this person, ask them, are you a racist? Is there a system of racism? Like, they didn't go through that, process to come to this conclusion that not all white people are racist, but they, confidently abide by this. I have talked to white people all over the world, and I've asked lots of them, are you racist? Are all white people racist? We talked about racism in general as a global system. If I have concluded all white people are racist, at minimum, well, I don't know about the rest of these niggers in the insane asylum, but that nigger Gus T has talked to a lot of white people. He might be wrong, but I can't exactly say that, he just messing around, not being logical. It seemed like there might be some thought as to how he concluded, yep, all white people are racist. And VGQ. Everybody's supposed to have that, right? Any hoodles. Things I thought were important. The electric shock, yes. Nurses, we think of nurses as angels, when she was talking about the pushback that she got for doing this project, and she's a white woman. And she was talking about the white women, white nurses were not pleased about all of this. I didn't even think like white nurses came out, uniquely bad or especially bad in this book. It just white people in general being white. Like, I don't know what but I guess you're not supposed to reveal truth about the system of white supremacy racism. So I guess, the just the out and out, this is not about, I mean, they're so naked. This is not about helping Negroes. This is about making sure we have suppressed any wink wink threat to white people. No, Leroy, no threat, but what? And some of this might just be straight white welfare. And you even heard that. She said, hey, we just need to get these Negro laborers. It's real easy. But the speeding ticket, we can get the doctor sign off. Yep, Leroy was speeding. Yep, lock him up. Boom. And now we got laborers. Get in there and we can put them to work. Making straight jackets. Crops, we got that. Hey, them potatoes ain't going to get themselves out the ground. And MAGA, this is what white people like. They get a whip. It's so many. You can yell at folks. They got tasers, air pistols. They got all kinds of ways that you can yell at folks and get that done, Leroy. You can make it efficient and all that. Oh, no. I like a whip. Even they got those pictures of the ICE officials. They were on the horses. Remember that? When they had the Haitian black immigrants and they were up on the horses. Get out of here. Get out of here. Toussaint, get out of here. They like that. Be up on the horse. Get the dogs. That's plantational too. We talked about all that. What does it mean to be white? And everything reinforcing system of white supremacy. The white welfare, though, can't be discounted. I know Dr. Camban would say a lot about because they do the same thing. Matter of fact, I had mentioned ICE. They do the same thing with the ICE officials. They talk about it. You need a job. You out of work. Silicon Valley hurting. All that. Come round up dark people. Work for ICE. Got them old flagrant racist messaging that they were talking about. Same thing with the insane asylum. Give you a nigger knocker and you can lock up black people all day long. Do it. Who'll ever even see? Crazy nigger, you can do whatever you want to. Plantational. Let's see. She said her mom was racist. I would have spent more time talking about just the current day racism, white supremacy in Australia and being classified as white, because I think they have some of the same sentiments about we don't want no immigrants here, especially if they're going to be no dark people. We don't want no dark people here. We want white Australia and keep Australia white and all of that. I would have got more details about that. Even see if we could have fished out some of those racist Australian jokes. Like, I don't know if we got too many of those in the archives, but maybe we can get her back on the program and get some more contemporary discussion of racism in Australia. I will note for listeners, we have had a number of white people who were born in different parts of the world, and they came to the U.S. to study the system of white supremacy racism. We just had that white woman on from Germany. She came here to Indiana to study racially restricted regions, wrote all that information up on it, talked about they had opportunities and financing even for her to come from Germany here to study. She came, that's even further, come from Australia all the way over here, study racism in healthcare, nursing. How many black people, that's, Dr. Welsing in reverse. How many black people say, hey, I'm going to go to Australia, study racism. I'm going to go to South Africa, study racism. I'm going to go to Venezuela, study racism. 10 years, I think, too. She said she came over here for 10 years. Research, write a book about white supremacy, racism. And that's why I said, like, why I've heard that a number of times. Like, that is, talk about act of white supremacy. And particularly to get some black person to come and rub you on the back and give you a warm cup of milk and hang in there. You can do it. Don't you let them badmouth you about being white and writing about what? You got racks of white historians, males and females, for decades. They have written and said whatever they have wanted to about black people, and they did not need no permission slip from Leroy and Lakeisha or then let me get your blessings, black brother, before I embark on this written literary endeavor. Now, you all right? Like, what? Come on, man. If, like I said, if anything, hey, all white people are racist, Leroy, right? Okay, I'm about to write this here book. Maybe you can read it. You can point out some of the ways that I practice racism, so maybe I don't do that in this text. That's what we need. Don't put the white fragility in there. How about that one? We know you're going to be racist, but just don't put the white fragility in there. That's all we need. Not no permission. And anyway, that's how we've been trained. I had someone ask, how did you all get that program or programs, plural, about not helping white people? That's how we have been trained. When I expressed my disappointment there, it's not with a non-white person. That's how we've been trained. White person falls down, they get a flat tire. A non-white person indicts them for practice racism. Oh, we supposed to be there. Let me help you up. Let me change that flat tire. Gus T, shut the hell up. That's how we've been trained. White chip. We got whole deactivate the white chip. whole programs about that. But at any rate, we will be here on Monday. See if I can do it correctly. 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central, 10 a.m. Pacific on Monday, February 23rd. We will do it up. White supremacy, racism in Brazil. Racist jokes. We'll brush up on my Espanol. And we will get to it. Nicolas Maduro, all of the goodies. Racial classifications in Venezuela. Cannot wait. Early Monday for the cows. Invest if you think the context of white supremacy is constructive. Hit the blog racism-notes.blogspot.com. racism-notes.blogspot.com. PayPal button in the top right corner. Beneath the button, you'll see the links for PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo. Enormous gratitude to all of the investors who have kept us on the air 17 years. Hopefully, we have been worthy of your time and energy. You'll see the link for the Amazon wish list under the button for PayPal. Again, much obliged for all the investors, hopefully worthy of your time and energy. We'll be here in about, be back in about 15 hours, give or take. Get some rest, be constructive, and we will even, I think, have an interim or somewhere in the middle of the week have a broadcast. Again, we'll be here early Thursday, 4 o'clock p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern on Thursday evening for neutralizing workplace racism. So just letting folks know, 1 hour early for Thursday, 1 hour early for Thursday. Be alerted. That's it. Much obliged for tuning in. Hopefully worthy of your Sunday evening or Monday afternoon, as it were. Sobriety would be best. That might alone be enough to get you locked up, penitentiary, asylum, both. You want a high, and even Dr. Welsing talked about you never know what they sneak in some of those substances that you puff on and such. That also might be enough to get you in the penitentiary, asylum, both. We need high functioning brain computers to solve this problem because it is all throughout the known universe. Creator, we ask that you remind us, stop saying not all white people are racist. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. C.O.W.S signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Even my conditioning has been conditioned.